Welcome, everyone, to the themed Transatlantic Tuesday live broadcast here at the DC-3 Society. I'm Lindsay Costabile. I will be your co-host today and throughout this week. We're very excited to bring a fantastic group of crew members that have actually participated across our 2019 and a few this week have actually just worked on the 2024 mission last year. We are excited to celebrate this legacy aircraft, the iconic Douglas DC-3, as we call her, the Grand Dame of aviation. We're so pleased to have so many wonderful crew members that continue to honor, pay tribute, and support, fly, crew, maintain the Douglas DC-3. And so on today's broadcast, you're going to get a sense of what it was like to fly this iconic airplane across the Northern Atlantic. There was the 2019 mission. We have some here that did the 2024 mission. It is no easy feat. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our wonderful moderator, part of our team, Stephen Lashley, who will introduce himself, introduce who's on our call today, and get us started. And don't forget, I'm going to be putting a link into the live YouTube broadcast. There'll be a form you can complete for a chance to win one of several great prizes, some from our 2019 mission, some from the 2024 mission, and some for the 90th anniversary. So make sure that you're staying tuned, you're watching, you're participating, ask questions. We will leave some time here shortly for some audience Q&A. So without further ado, Steve, I'm turning it over to you, sir. Good sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Yes, my name is Stephen Lashley. I do some communications for the D-Day Squadron. And I have here with me today Doug Rosendahl with That's All Brother, Brian Douglas with Miss Montana, John Sessions with Pan Am, and Brandon Jewett with Legend Airways. Our goal here today is, some folks may have this image in their mind of, the dashing pilot and the flight scarf and the leather helmet, and the crossing the Atlantic involves basically a map of the globe with a red line going across from Indiana Jones movie. But then there's the reality of fuel, oil, FBOs, and what it actually takes to bring an 80-year-old aircraft across the Atlantic flying under 10,000 feet. So we're going to give you a little taste of that pie of what it looks like to actually do this in reality. And speaking for myself as a layman, I was kind of a fly on the wall in crossing when the crossing preparations were happening in Oxford, Connecticut in 2019 and 2024. Two words that just jumped out of my mind were logistics and adaptability. You've got to prepare, but then you've got to be willing to adapt when things go wrong or when circumstances change. So that all being said, I'm going to invite our participants to just jump in on each of these questions and add your perspective. Maybe add the single word that comes to your mind and what encapsulates this whole kind of monumental effort. So let's just start with something that's simple. Can you share one of your most memorable moments when you were making that transatlantic flight in a DC-3, and what was it that made it so unique to you? Anybody want to jump in?
Well, I can help you out on that, Steve. I think we're
Okay.
all trying to be differential to our fellows here. The weather in Goose Bay was awful. We were there for 3 days, and then when we left, there was only enough refuel capacity at Narsarsuaq for about half the ships in a single daylight period. They were taking drums and feeding them into trucks to have a pump that could fuel a DC-3. So we were standing by. The first seven or so went, and we had to wait 3 additional days to get away, is my recollection. And there was an ice storm over the North Atlantic that got in the way of our timely departure. So we ended up vectoring up to uh, Centerstrom Fjord up in the Arctic area, much further north in Greenland. And we landed there. We kind of had a loose formation with Sherman Smoot and his crew. And we landed there at night. Our preparation to get around this weather and to go that way was rewarded. We had beautiful VFR up the fjords to the retired Air Force Base. And waiting for both crews was a local school bus with boxed lunches on the benches, those beautiful vinyl 1-inch foam benches, and took us on the 30-mile road up to the ice cap, where our local guide, our new best friend, took us on a hike. And by now we're talking about midnight, but of course it's midday light. And he dispatches me to the ice cap to chip away some ice and bring it back. And he then produces from his backpack a bottle of his best vodka. And so the two crews were toasting the DC-3 from the polar ice cap. Over.
Wow. Wow, that's a moment. But would anyone else like to share something that really was their I guess clear memory the first time anybody brings it up to you?
I'll go. If
Go ahead.
This is Brandon with the Legend Airplane. I think
Mhm.
the biggest takeaway for me was no matter how much someone prepares or thinks they've prepared to accomplish something like this, there's just a tremendous amount of unforeseen. Uh, just like John just said, the weather is the unexpected variable. You know, I had visions in my head, and I've ridden on airliners across the North Atlantic, but that's just a completely different scope and point of reference. So, you know, the illusion that I think others and even myself maybe had in my head that we were going to have this happy little formation of DC-3s flying the North Atlantic, and that's just not the reality. The reality is it's an extremely harsh environment. Of the 30 plus hours we spent over the ocean going over and back, I think we saw the ocean maybe an hour because you're just in IMC. It's minus 30, even though it's late May, you know, at 11,000 feet. It's cold. Your heaters are struggling to keep up. Our aircraft has a great heater. So we were quite comfortable, but I know a lot of the other crews that were flying legacy airframes with, you know, bare fuselages in the back. It was snowmobile suits and battery operated socks just to stay at a comfortable temperature. So, like I say, the illusion that it was just going to be, you know, VFR and look at the ocean and that alone has its fear factor, if you will. But the reality is we didn't see the ocean. We were in the clouds the whole time. And I think the coolest thing that hit me along that first initial crossing from Goose to Narsarsuaq, we went in the very first wave very early that first morning. And we were about halfway across, kind of calculating our PNR. And it was kind of one of those, we had 5 GPSs, iPads, 2 onboard GPSs, everything in the sun telling us where Narsarsuaq was. Obviously, it was like looking out of a milk bottle out the window. And the crazy thing was, we were looking at the chart. We saw that the beacons, the old NDBs, were still there. I think in November.
Well, it looks like we made a little interruption there with Brandon. Would anyone like to jump in with their
I'll jump
thoughts?
in.
Okay, yeah, please go
I'll
ahead.
jump in, Brian, with Miss Montana. I would kind of echo
Was
the
another
thing
crew
about
member.
being in. We lost you, Brandon.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Yep.
I don't know where you lost me. Sorry. I'll just pick up real quick. I guess the cool part was in the middle of the North Atlantic. We're sitting there tuning the ADFs and to just kind of verify our position, even though the GPS said we knew exactly where we were. We got a weird peace of mind when we tuned those beacons on Narsarsuaq and the needle swung to 12 o'clock and pointed exactly where we were going. And so we both said to ourselves, and I said to my co-pilot, I said, would you rather be in a 75-year-old airplane with GPS, knowing exactly where you are, or a brand new airplane with only this ADF telling us where we're going? And we couldn't come up with a good answer. So I thought that was kind of an ironic moment for us.
Yeah, I just would sort of echo the Greenland piece. I think was important and meaningful to all of us that stopped there. We were behind everybody, so we were a week or two behind. We also we're in Goose Bay, and the weather at Narsarsuaq was awful. So we called an audible and flew all the way up to Iqaluit in northern Canada and spent the night, got gas, and then jumped over to Sonderstrom like John did. And just landing in Greenland, we're hurrying, we're thinking about everything that we need and can go wrong and planning, and then we land there, and we all just sort of took a breath and said, "You realize we just landed in freaking Greenland?" Because none of us had ever been there before, much less in a 80-year-old airplane, and that's a pretty significant moment. I don't know that many people who have accomplished that. So that was memorable, really memorable kind of, and it was our first uh, Atlantic crossing, going feet wet.
I I've given several rubber chicken dinner speeches since then, and the thing that I always say is, we flew the same airplane on the same route to the same destination as the kids did at that time, 75 years prior, and what we did had nothing in common with what they did. We had 50,000 plus hours of experience in the cockpit. They were lucky to have 500. We had a bucket full of GPSs and another bucket full of batteries. And they had a brand new navigator fresh out of nav school with a sextant. And if it was overcast, they had a compass and a stopwatch. So, and to speak to what Brandon said about the clouds or the undercast was actually merciful, because anytime you couldn't see the ocean, you could just imagine that that was an Iowa cornfield down below me. And for us, the trip was very effortless. It was no different than flying from Denver to Des Moines. We got on top on the way to Narsarsuaq. We weren't IMC for more than 30, 45 minutes, and got no ice. We got a little frosting of ice later that day going on to Iceland. But I flew freight in Twin Beaches and DC-3s, and the ice we got was nothing like I've experienced in the Midwest in the wintertime.
Were there
You know,
any
we
challenge? Oh, please go ahead.
Interestingly, we on our crossing we had we could see the ocean almost the entire time. And yeah, it was kind of cold and gray looking, but we never saw a ship. Now there may have been some down there, but and I don't know that we were looking the whole time, but we never saw a ship coming or going. So it's pretty desolate and remote up there, and it is gorgeous too.
Are there any challenges that jump out to any of you side of the weather? Because obviously the weather is really going to be the elephant in the room in making the crossing, but mechanically, when navigation kind of is a subset of weather, but were there any other challenges outside of what you were just that come top of mind other than what we were just talking about?
Well, I'll take that one. When we decided we were going to do this, people said, "Aren't you nervous about flying a 80-year-old airplane across the North Atlantic?" And I was fortunate to be flying That's All Brother, which had, a year and a half prior come out of a multi-million-dollar restoration, was expensive, essentially a brand new airplane. And I said, and I've spent a lot of time in the Midwest in the ice. I wasn't that concerned about the ice. I've spent my whole life, below 10,000 feet fighting with ice. I said, we're going to take 75, 80 um, type A people. That anybody that does this has got a lot of gumption, or you wouldn't be doing it. And we're going to take that 75, 80 type A people, and we're going to concentrate them in a pretty small group and put them under stress for 6 weeks. I said, this isn't an aeronautical experience. This is a psychological experiment. But I got to give credit to Eric Zipkin, his leadership style, and Kevin Riley's set a tone, a briefing on the weather that really made it. It made it. I mean, there was no bloodshed, which really surprised me, quite frankly.
Hmm. Wow.
And I resonate with Doug on that, is that it is a tough, it's weird because you're so humbling, because to his point that it's no measure compared to what the guys did 80 years ago. because we have this plethora of experience. But there is a lot of ego and attitude and idea about how to accomplish rolling up a rope or something that, as Doug said, it's pretty simple. And I've said that like Doug said, going Denver to Iowa, I said it was no different than when I go to Oshkosh. We climbed up and we were in the clouds and we just flew and then we were there. And the way I took this whole journey, which we were one of the few crews that did the whole journey, all the way over, all the way back. I put 100 hours on my airplane in 5 weeks, and we didn't miss any event other than the initial day of Oxford because we blew a cylinder, and we kind of felt like the single engine failure on Apollo 13. That was our, to your point of mechanical concerns, that was our hiccup for this mission, if you will, was our cylinder failure on our first leg of our first day on the journey. We were stuck in Iowa City for 2 days fixing the airplane. But for me, as an owner of the airplane, all that responsibility, in addition to the stress of the actual mission, fell on my shoulders. I had some financial sponsors, but I'm just an airline pilot. I'm not an independently wealthy person. But I knew my airplane had D-Day history, and I was determined to see this airplane, a veteran of D-Day, appear. But the anxiety that I felt if I blew a motor and the logistics to try and fix it was tremendous leading up to the experience. But to Doug's point, Eric Zipkin's leadership style, and he had established relationships along the way that some were, like any relationship, some were so beneficial and so kind and gracious and helpful, and others were maybe not as great. But this overwhelming feeling of support just resonated as the mission went on. And of course, there's always hiccups, and I'm sure there's criticisms as well. But to me, I just felt that if the wheels really came off the wagon, there was going to be 10 people there, including the other crew members, even with all their egos, that were going to jump up and help and support each other. Once we were kind of collected, moving the same day, same direction, because it certainly wasn't formation flying across the Atlantic.
I don't know what you guys are talking about with Type A's, John. We didn't have any Type A's on our crew, did you?
Bunch of cowering, wilted flowers in my crew. The challenge that comes to mind, we were blessed, all of us, with quite good mechanical outcomes to take 15 aircraft and to go round trip as we did with perhaps nothing worse than a blown cylinder. It's truly remarkable. Hats off not only to the organization, but to the whole Warbird mechanical scene, where they can take so many airplanes in different initial condition and get them to that state. But in speaking about the trip afterward, the story that I like to recall about the most dangerous moment, we were descending from the North Atlantic a little bit early as we saw the islands of Scotland. And the reason we were descending a little early is neither of the pilots, I think I was in the front row with Gene Vizzetti in the right seat, and he had about 30,000 hours between various airlines. And I asked for an early descent because I couldn't feel either foot with the cold, and I thought I better have some control of the rudders when we landed in Scotland. So the controller came over and gave us the arrival into Glasgow on our way to the smaller airport on the coast, and started vectoring us right over the city of Glasgow, and neither one of us could understand her through the brogue. Uh, I asked Gino in the intercom, I said, do you know what she's saying? And he said, no, let's just stay at 1,500 feet and see if we can find the airport. And turns out there's a Saturday Night Live skit that recreates the experience we had. So we've had a good laugh about it since. Over.
So what I was going to ask about what it takes to prepare an aircraft to make this kind of crossing, but listening to you, I think a possibly more interesting question is, what does it take to respond when you have an issue? So if you've got a blown jug, the logistics of getting those replacement parts where they need to be in such a compressed time frame? And plus the communication that's got to happen to all the different air crews. Does somebody have the part already? You know, that kind of thing. Maybe if any of you want to jump in on that, I think that might be interesting.
Well, amongst the fleet, somebody had almost one of everything that could easily be changed, short of an engine. We had brake problems. We had a tire off 2 or 3 times. We had brake problems, and somebody loaned us a brake axle setup to get us home. But we had a lot of resources on our airplane, and then somebody had a built-up tire and brake. There was a lot of parts there, and there was an engine on a pallet sitting back in the United States that could have went on a FedEx airplane if we didn't need an engine. Thankfully, we did not.
What do you feel is how does crew coordination and your teamwork, not just dealing with mechanical issues, but dealing with weather, dealing with the brogue accent, how do you think that working together kind of helps you guys to get where you need to be? Because I know you've made the jokes about egos, but I'm not hearing any egos at all when I sit back and listen to this. But it's more about kind of putting the mission first. So how do you feel? What is your own, I guess, perspective on how teamwork really kind of plays an important role in all this?
I'll take a stab at that. Maybe because we were the newest crew really in the world, DC-3 crew in the world. All of our pilots got our type ratings the week before we left. And some of us knew each other, some of us didn't, but there was a lot of experience. But the cohesiveness really melded, really did well. We kind of formed over hours of flying and working on the airplane. We didn't have hierarchy. Everybody did everything. And by the time we got to Europe, it was really a really well-formed team. And there were only 6 of us that went over and 4 of us that came back. So that was essential, that we knew kind of almost by the time we were halfway through, we could finish each other's sentences.
I would say also, it's like I was very careful who I took on my team, because you're going to spend 4 to 6 weeks with this person. And I don't know anybody that I want to spend that much time with. So I was very choosy about the guy that I chose to be my right-hand man, because like I said, our crew, it was really me and one other guy, and then we had a couple other pilots that were friends that wrote. One went over with us, another one went back, and I think we were the smallest crew. But my buddy Colvin, he's an A&P and airline pilot, same as me, but we're just those guys. He's the kind of guy that I like, and why I chose him was we are on the same page. I love Gene Kranz's quote in Apollo 13 when the wheels are coming off the wagon, if you will, and he's like, "Stop, stop, stop. Let's just work the problem." And that's the mentality you have, is when adversity faced. And it's like I tell people all the time, as Doug said, rubber chicken speeches, I've done a handful of those myself. But the thing that I always tell people is we worked on the airplane every time we stopped in some capacity. And it's not because we needed to work on it almost every time for something minor, but we were always able to keep it rolling. And that's, to me, a testament to the airplane, that I was able to put 100 hours on the thing in a month. And obviously that's a low threshold compared to airline use, but pretty substantial for an 80-year-old airplane. So I think that's what I liked about my buddy Clue, is he knows how to just shut up and work the problem. And his son, Barron, who was 10 years old at the time, was so invaluable because he could grab the tools out of the bag. We'd say, "Barron, 7/16 open end. Barron, grab that ratchet, 1/4 inch." He knew everything as a 10-year-old. It was so valuable because it saved us 100 trips up and down a ladder. So, you know, that kid's growing up, and I really think this trip was a big launch for him. And Doug knows him pretty well. He's got his private now, and he's doing a lot of things, following his dad's footsteps. But having somebody that can back up what they say is key. And I think Doug, and I know, a lot of the other crews, that's what that experience brought, is there was just such a vast diversity of experience. Everybody had something valuable to add at all the time.
So we're getting close to our time here, but I wanted to give you all an opportunity because this is the kind of things that really add flavor to things. But each of you, just an anecdote or a funny story, and anything that's so wide open, no guardrails. What's your entertaining story personally that happened to you during the crossing and this experience?
I'll give a quick one that comes to mind. We were, as I said, behind everybody. We were kind of the underdogs, and we're coming in from Prestwick, Scotland, into Duxford, and none of us really had done much low-level flying in Europe, and so we were a little flummoxed by all the complicated airspace. We were pretty sure that we'd made a hash of it and we'd violated some rule. We tried to stay low so we stay out of all that complex airspace, but we're a little nervous that we might get a letter. We were on instrument flight plan the whole way, and the next day, somebody piped up on our Facebook page and said, "Hey, I just wanted to weigh in. I was the controller that directed Miss Montana from Prestwick to Duxford, and I was just wanted to let them know I was impressed by how well the American pilots handled complex UK airspace." So we figured, well, we fooled somebody.
Before we go, I'd like to make a comment, and it's not humorous, but it was a real realization for me. Was It's awfully easy to take for granted here in America the freedom we enjoy and the openness and access that we have the National Air System. And we landed at Coventry, no, Cambridge, and did two operations there, and the fees were over $1,500 for two takeoffs and landings. The airport opens at 9 o'clock and closes at 5. And if you want to, after hours, you have to pay overtime to the tower and overtime to the fire brigade. And this was I mean, it was an airplane. There were military 737s on the airport. We so often take for granted. And I had long conversations with Mark Baker at AOPA and other influencers about how hard we need to fight to maintain the freedoms that we have to fly here in America, because general aviation in Europe is basically non-functional. And again, that's not funny, it's true, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen here.
Yeah. And my last takeaway was the Doug, you lead into so many great points, but my takeaway was there's so many things that I just got humor out of. To expand on what Doug just said, opens at 9, closes at 5. I mean, I remember in France, we were trying to leave. I can't remember what airport. And the guy's like, well, the airport opens at 7. And I said, okay, we're going to leave at 7. And he says, well, but the fire brigade's not here till 8. So you can't leave before 8. And I said, okay, we'll leave at 8. And then he says, well, but the tower doesn't open till 9. So you can't get a clearance till 9. And I says, well, when's the airport open? He said 7. And it was just like the most frustrating conversation I'd ever had. And to that point, it's like in the US, you want to leave at 4 in the morning, nobody cares. And you just do it. And it's just,
Oh, Brandon, looks like we lost you there. Does anyone else have any thoughts to share?
Yeah,
Brandon's speechless for once.
Yeah. Oh,
a group of us went to the Shuttleworth collection as an outing while we were in England, and I think there were 7 or 8 from the squadron. Shuttleworth has a grass runway that's rather short compared to many of the places we landed, and it was a lovely outing. It was one of the highlights of the British airshow season to have 7 C-47s and DC-3s there on the green for the day on a Saturday. And we're doing our final turns and checklist items. And I said to my colleague on short final, any final words of wisdom? Because it really was a challenging airport for a big airplane. And he said, yeah, this is not the time to bounce one. So happily, it was uneventful landing. It probably played well in the video, and but those were his words of advice. This is no time to bounce one.
Truer words were never spoken. So I actually, a question came in from the audience that's pretty interesting. I know I said we were wrapping things up, but this is an interesting question. They wanted to know what about flying and crewing a DC-3, what do you wish was on a modern aircraft today? So I don't know if they're talking about a specific piece of technology or the experience. So we'll go with either, but is there anything about flying a DC-3 that you wish you could have that same experience in a modern aircraft?
I'll take that one to start, a tail wheel. Because if modern airplanes had tail wheels, we'd have a lot better pilots. And the modern airplanes basically, and I experience it all the time riding the back of a aluminum sewer pipe. They just crash them onto the runway and they straighten themselves out and roll down the runway. And DC-3 won't tolerate that, and it would demand a higher level of training. And sadly, airmanship and basic airmanship skills have vanished from all but vanished from the pilot community, and it's a real travesty.
I like the having a window you can slide open in flight.
It's
I
true.
would say formation flying too, to echo the earlier point about pilot capability and stick and rudder skills. But in a modern airplane, if you're behind the curve with a formation, you add mash and you make it up in no time at all. With a DC-3, if you have forgotten your middle school geometry, you're never going to catch up.
So we've got another question now. This is from Claire Parr. She was aboard Lassie in 2024. And she wanted to ask you because she remembered the experience of flying in North Southwick, and she wanted to know, can you describe your feelings flying up towards the train in the airport and just that the scenery coming up the fjord and the view and landing and also what you thought about those original young pilots that must have experienced the same thing so many years ago.
It's spiritual.
Hmm.
Yeah, we
Wow.
we came. The only time we flew into Nars was from the north, from Iceland, because we didn't drop in there on the way over. We stopped there on the way back, and it was crystal clear. And so we sort of came in from the north and circled down to land. But if you've ever read Fate is the Hunter, it's amazing what that feels like because he describes it better than any of us can, and was flying in an airplane like Doug described. Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Fate is the Hunter was exactly what I was going to say, Brian. Ernie Gann described it perfectly, and it's just, to imagine again, 19 and 20-year-old kids that were looking for a sunk barge at the inlet to the fjord, and if they turned up the wrong one, they could very likely end up in a blind canyon and not make it out. There's statistics that they lost, greater than 15% of the airplanes crossing the North Atlantic. And it's a sobering thought. Um, and I thought about that a lot. How difficult that challenge was, and we had XM radio and for weather. I mean, and Windy is an app on the internet that had absolutely accurate skew T diagrams that told us where the ice was, and better yet, where the ice was not going to be, where not going to be. It would just the contrast from what we did to what they did can't be overstated. The courage, and we had the ability to wait out the weather. We left basically almost 2 weeks early so that we would have weather, the opportunity to hold for weather, and those kids every day. Airplanes had to leave no matter what the weather was, or they were going to get jammed up at Goose Bay. And when they got to Narsarsuaq, they couldn't stay there because there was no parking space. It's beyond comprehension, the courage that those young men and women that ferried those airplanes across the Blue Spruce Raids had.
Wow. And on that note, I think that is a perfect time to leave it. I'm going to turn this back over to Lindsay. Uh, Lindsay, did you have did any final questions or anything come in before we conclude this?
No, no final questions on my part. Just want to really appreciate Steve for helping to moderate this panel. And Steve's actually going to be moderating tomorrow's member and partner exclusive film screening, followed by a Q&A with some also more familiar faces that are across our crew from the 2019 mission. More specifically, we're going to be joined with co-host Sound Off Films that produced Into Flight Once More, narrated by Gary Sinise, and executive producer Joe Anderson, who was the owner and operator of the former Spirit of Bonovia, which is now Spirit of Douglas. So we got a great slate set up for tomorrow. So if you've not joined the society yet, make sure that you join in. Our DC-3 society members will be given a very special exclusive link to access that screening, which is at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And like I said, following the screening will be the Q&A with audience participation. On Thursday, it'll be Throttle Thursday, and we're actually going to be joined with a headliner of the Spirit of Douglas crew that just completed The Odyssey, which is that documentary series that is currently out. You can go to spiritofdouglas.org for to capture all of that excitement and all the details and crews. So that crew will also join us, in addition to a few other notable individuals that you may have met along the way, which is Steve Rose of D-Day Doll, Sergio Allen, Florida Air Cargo, Brooks Petit of Veris Jet Cells, which is the former Clipper Tabitha May, Daniel Wotrig and Chris Hicks, who fly like 10 DC-3s across our DC-3 society. So definitely don't miss out on what's to come this week. Brian, John, and Doug, cannot thank you all enough. You're a joy to work with. Your expertise is unmatched. We look forward to getting in the air and flying with you all soon. For those who are tuning in, make sure that you get a chance to fill out the form, which is the link is in the YouTube chat, for a chance to win several great prizes from our 2019 mission, 2024 mission, as well as 90th anniversary branded items. Thank you all. We're going to go ahead and tune off and sign off the live stream, and we'll see you all hopefully tomorrow or for Throttle Thursday. Thank you so